welcome back to another episode of Film Facts Stats. We are a notch above your group chat. I'm Jack Coyle, and I'm joined by my co-host Mason Wood. Mason is a football editor for Backsports Page, as well as a contributor to Shy City Sports. Mason, we are on a very special episode today. What are we going to be talking about?
We got plenty of quarterbacks, the game changers, the franchise changers, the guys that are going to change everything for these NFL teams this upcoming season. We got plenty of guys to talk about, all the guys that are supposed to be the franchise guy for these NFL teams. Can't wait to get into it.
Absolutely, buddy. And also joining us is Freddie Friedman. Freddie is a film aficionado, an NFL expert, as well as a professional handicapper. Freddie, I know that you're excited to get into these QBs. What are we going to be talking about, Freddie?
Yes, sir. So Mason already talked about what we're going to be talking about, but I would tell you this. I have someone at the top of my board, and we're not going to get into rankings, but I have a very different opinion of one of these guys than almost everyone else out there, including both of my co-hosts right here. And I'm not so sure that these are going to be the franchise changers. These are supposed to be the franchise changers, but a lot of question marks around a lot of these guys. We'll get into it. Jack, back over to you.
Yes, we will get into it. So, as we alluded to, today we are going to do our quarterback breakdowns. This is actually going to be the start of a series for us. We are going to be doing breakdowns for each position group as we get closer to the NFL draft. So, make sure you tune in every week to kind of see how we're viewing these guys that are the top of everyone's draft boards. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kick things off with the consensus overall pick, or the consensus number one pick on pretty much everyone's board, Caleb Williams.
Absolutely. Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC, 6'1", 215, 22 years old. This is the guy that everybody's basically been talking about. They've been comparing him as the next Patrick Mahomes, the guy that has been the consensus number one overall pick for pretty much a full calendar year, it feels like. He's been the guy since pretty much last year. Everybody's known he's coming out. I was able to do some research on him. I'll talk about the good before I get into the bad first. Now, the good, there was a lot of good on Caleb Williams' tape. Obviously, he's the number one overall pick that everyone believes. So the first thing that I'll say is he has this insane ability to where he does not need to have his feet set to make a throw. It does not matter what angle he's throwing from. He's just able to make those throws. It's very similar to what Patrick Mahomes can do, where he can make these really weird arm angles and stuff. Caleb Williams does it, just not to the same degree, but you can see kind of a similar thing where he all of it is in the upper body, and that really helps him in some of those moments, especially when he's outside of the pocket. He's really able to deliver downfield on some of these downfield balls when he's, way outside the pocket. Some really difficult throws that we see NFL quarterbacks struggle with, he's going to have no problem making. To my point with that, he's very good both inside and outside of the pocket. His accuracy doesn't waver when he goes outside of the pocket. It's almost the same, if not better, when he gets out of the pocket. He's very, very good when he's mobile, but he's also very, very good in the pocket as well. He can kind of do both depending on the offense that you're trying to run in the NFL. He's a fantastic athlete. He can pretty much work himself out of almost any situation, and he's definitely going to try to. That much I will say. He will try to figure a way out of every single situation. He's a bit of an improviser in that sense, but he's really good. He's a very fantastic athlete. He's just really good at kind of getting away from guys and finding the angles to kind of run around them and really just buy the extra half second in order to make throws that he needs to make. That's what he's really, really good at. The other thing is that when he's really feeling it, his accuracy is absolutely elite. His accuracy is pretty much elite majority of the time, but I think that there's a few times, and I'll get into this more in the cons, but he can get rattled at times, and that's when the accuracy will kind of dip, i.e. the Notre Dame game is kind of the big one I think everybody looks at for any cons they're trying to find, but it is just one game, so we have to keep that one in mind. For me, when I look at the pros, I think that he's going to be a really solid quarterback kind of no matter where he goes. I think that he's going to need like in USC, he didn't have the best protection, was not anywhere near what it could have been. However, I think that where he ends up in the NFL, he's going to need solid protection in order to be successful. Without solid protection, I think he's going to be kind of a mess. I think he's going to be a bit of a disaster. I think everybody's saying he could go to the Chicago Bears, and that's one of them that could end up being a disaster with some of the times the way their offense runs. Obviously, Luke Getsy's not there anymore, but he has to be put in at least a decent situation. If he's put in a really bad situation, Caleb Williams is going to struggle, and the talent's going to be there. It's just going to be, can he put it all together? One of the other cons is that I felt that he just, at times, it's not often, but at times he can kind of panic and he forces himself into bad situations that he just shouldn't be in. So he just has to sometimes stay calm. And a lot of the times he does stay calm. There's just a few moments where he gets rattled. And when he's rattled, he's rattled. It just doesn't happen often. It's not that he's consistently hot and cold. He's consistently hot, just very rarely a little bit cold. I also think when he is rattled, he's far twitchier. When you watch it on film, I feel like you can almost see it on film based on his drop back, based on the way his shoulders are moving, his legs are moving. You can almost tell whether or not he's comfortable back there, whether or not he's feeling it, or whether or not he just feels completely just out of it at that current moment. And I felt like that was very visible on film. For me, my pro comparison for him, I kind of feel like and you guys can very much disagree with this. I feel like he's kind of like a more mobile Aaron Rodgers, maybe even a less dynamic Patrick Mahomes. I think just the ability to throw from kind of any angle is just that's his biggest strength. And I think it's going to really help him in the NFL because there's going to be a lot of times he's going to have to use that number one strength to help out his team. Where he's going to end up getting picked, he's definitely going to be asked to be, Superman at times. And there are times that he can definitely do that, but there may be one or two times that he has a fault. It just, I think teams are going to have to hope it doesn't happen in those really, really big moments. Jack, do you have any thoughts on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, man. I want to echo a lot of those pros. I see eye to eye on a lot of those, but I actually am just going to piggyback on what you just said because it's fresh in my mind. Now, he is going to have to step up and make big plays at whatever team he goes to. One of my big drawbacks for Caleb Williams, and really it's kind of one of the only drawbacks I have from him, is his tendency to play hero ball. Now we saw it happen against Notre Dame. We saw it happen a couple of other times throughout the season. That's one of my only big drawbacks for Caleb Williams. So I just wanted to mention that while it was at the top of my mind. Now, the pros for Williams, he's got incredible arm strength, like you mentioned, plenty of athleticism, tons of velocity on those throws. His decision making, in my opinion, is about where it should be. There's plenty of tape of him, making really good progressions. Something I did want to mention is a lot of people do harp on that Notre Dame game. And I know I've mentioned it a couple times on this podcast. I was there and I'm a big Notre Dame fan. So at the time I was completely bought into the narrative that Caleb Williams had fallen apart. And now actually, when I took a step back and I had the opportunity to actually watch the tape when I wasn't at the game live, I saw that he was actually making a lot of the right decisions throughout that game. I felt like he still had a lot of really solid fundamentals. So, yeah, of course, he did make a couple of really bad choices. I don't think that we can point to that game and say that Caleb Williams is going to be a bust because of that. So I've actually kind of gone full circle on him. Earlier in the year, I talked about how I was kind of concerned about his mental toughness, some of those things. I've kind of come around on that. I don't think that it's really going to be as much of a factor. I think that maybe I let my Notre Dame bias get ahead of me at the time. There is one other glaring issue with him that I think we need to talk about that I don't see get brought up enough. He had 32 fumbles in 3 seasons in college. That's 4 shy of a fumble a game. That's pretty noteworthy, at least. I think that we need to at least bring up the fact that his ball protection isn't necessarily where you might want it to be. But really high on Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be a stud. Freddie, what are your thoughts on Caleb?
Yeah, guys. I mean, I think you guys did a terrific job. So I'm just going to take my biggest point on Caleb Williams and just rephrase what you guys said. He can get too creative, and he often falls apart when he does that. So you have no idea if he's going to reach his Patrick Mahomes comparison that Mason talked about, or if he's going to be just like a Josh Rosen. Like you have no clue what's coming in because he gets so creative. He tries to play that hero ball, and then he can make the off-platform throws sometimes, but sometimes he can't. And he makes a lot of mistakes when he plays hero ball, including fumbles. So that's my only point. You guys did a terrific job, and that's it.
Thanks, Fred.
Absolutely. And Jack, I want to kind of echo. I mean, you made a good point about the fumbling. And I think that, when I actually was looking at some other people's scouting reports on him, one of the things that a lot of people talked about was that they compared him to Kyler Murray in a sense. And part of it was because he kind of, when he runs, he carries the ball a lot like Kyler Murray does. Kyler Murray kind of holds it out there. And I think that we see a little bit of that in Caleb Williams. And unfortunately, Kyler Murray's been in the NFL 5, 6 years, and it still hasn't changed despite, injuries and all that. So, you have to hope that maybe that can be coached up for Caleb Williams. But I think you guys make some really solid points as well for him. And I have to say, I think he's definitely going to be the number one pick. I think he is, in my personal opinion, the best quarterback in this draft. But I think that out of all of the quarterbacks that we've seen that have been these perennial number one picks, he has a much lower floor, but also a much higher ceiling as well. Go ahead, Freddie. Sorry.
You're good, man. I was just gonna just parlay that into Drake, man. I think that's exactly right, in that he has no floor. So it's really kind of like, what's the GM gonna do? So when we get to that point, it's just about understanding GMs and their tendencies and what the city's trying to do business wise and everything like that. Moving on to Drake May, as Mason was about to lead us into. So this is a quarterback I have the lead on, and I have a very different opinion than a lot of people on him. So I'm going through the film, right? And let's start with the positives. So he's shown some ability to read the field. He does usually get locked onto one read, though. So, like, even with that positive, there's a caveat there. He throws a good deep ball when he's accurate, and we'll get back to his accuracy. He has good athleticism and solid arm talent. You could even say good or very good arm talent, depending on the last game you watched. Those are the positives. The negatives, he has below average pocket awareness. He grounds way too many throws. Not like he's under pressure throwing the ball away. He knows where his receivers are and he throws it at their feet. No, he just grounds them, which ties into his accuracy. His accuracy fails him multiple times per game. Not once or twice, multiple times per game. He's going to ground some throws. He's going to miss a deep ball because he's just inaccurate. It fails him multiple times per game. He also particularly struggles to see the defense when he's escaping pressure. Kind of similar to Caleb Williams in that when he's getting away from pressure, his ability to be a good quarterback will often disappear. And that's not something you want to see, especially, so below average pocket awareness. Okay, so he's not escaping sacks all that often. Well, when he does, you don't really have a good quarterback back there. So that's not great. And then lastly, he plays the game very taut, very tense, and that really wrecks his mechanics. If he was relaxed, he could be consistent with his mechanics, and he could really build on his game and get better. But he doesn't play the game that way, so that's very concerning. I'm going to keep it at that. Just kind of a broad view perspective on Drake May. Jack, over to you for your thoughts on Drake.
Yeah,
May.
man. First of all, great analysis, and actually, I think you and I kind of have a similar feel on Drake May. I know Freddie and I on just like a one-on-one call, we were talking, and I was like, man, I don't really get it. Like, I don't really get why everyone is so high on Drake May. And that's kind of where I'm at. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's got good arm strength. I think he's got great size. I think that that's a really big pro for him. He's 6'4", 235. He's got decent speed. He's got a good rhythm. He does throw strikes occasionally. He is confident in the pocket. However, he does not possess the elite athleticism that Williams and Jaden Daniels do. He attempts to force throws with his arm strength, particularly on one of my issues with him is that he has late throws. He's a step late a lot of the times when you watch his film, especially when he's under pressure, like you mentioned, Freddie. He's a really aggressive player. I like the aggressiveness a lot of the times out of the quarterback, but to May, I think it's going to be a detriment. I think it's going to be a double-edged sword. I think it's going to bite him a number of times in the NFL. He's going to try and force throws. The biggest issue is exactly what you said, Freddie, his accuracy. I have a huge, huge concern with his accuracy. He only had a 66.1 on target rating this year, which was the lowest out of the classes. He routinely misses slants behind his receivers that are just a touch late. He also has a problem adjusting to safeties when they shift. So there's a lot of things that he needs to clean up. However, he's a young guy and he does have good foundation. He's shown a lot of comfort in the pocket. So for me, I think that he could end up being the franchise guy in the right system. But for now, I'm kind of not really seeing that elite ability that I see in a lot of some of these other guys. Mason, what are your thoughts, brother?
No, Jack, I think you make some really good points about, if he's in a good system, he's got a very good chance of being successful. Look, he's not the first inaccurate quarterback we've seen come out of UNC, that could go number 2. So, I'm just gonna put that out there. I think that, you guys make good points about his accuracy where it's very strange, but like when his accuracy's good. He can really hit some spots, but then he can really mess up and really miss some spots. And it's just that it's one side or the other. There's not really kind of an in between, I think, with Drake May. But to your guys' point, a lot of the stuff that we've harped on is all stuff that's very coachable. So with the right coaching staff, he could very much kind of become something solid. So, originally I felt like Drake May, just to me, he felt like he'd somehow end up being a Raider. But if he ends up being a Raider, it has to be with Luke Getsy. I can assure you we will see all of the faults in Drake May very fast. So better hope he doesn't go to Las Vegas. But definitely, I like Drake May, but I do see a lot of the flaws. And to your guys' point, he just doesn't feel like a guy that can turn it on and really be elite. But he's a guy that he can be your quarterback if you have solid foundation with your coaches around him.
Yeah, guys, I think you guys really articulated your points well. And we're all kind of saying similar things. We disagree in some small places. Particularly, I thought he played pretty taut. Jack, you thought he played pretty comfortable a lot of the time. A big thing I want to mention, yeah, obviously we're not going to analyze GMs and talk about, oh, he's going to go second or fourth because this GM, that GM.
Right.
I just had to mention Luke Getsy, guys. Don't be surprised if he pulls something out with the Raiders, bro. I We need to have that conversation. We need to have a special episode just on Luke Getsy, and then you guys will understand why I hate Justin Fields so much. But or you won't. But we need to have that session anyway. Moving on to our next quarterback. Take it away.
Yes, I believe next up will be Jaden Daniels. Now, the 2023 Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels, had an unbelievable career. He's thrown for 87 touchdowns, he's rushed for 30. He's been an incredible weapon in college. And really, he's really stood out in this last year. Now, Jaden Daniels on film, he has elite athleticism. I don't think either of my co-hosts will disagree that he's the best athlete of this class. So, like I said, I think whatever team he goes to, he's going to be an incredible weapon. Now, I harped on Caleb Williams fumbling quite a bit. Jaden Daniels, I would say he scrambles rushes maybe about the equivalent amount. He's only fumbled 17 times over his 5 years. Great ball security. Now, as a passer, he's very good accuracy at all levels of the field. And that's what I really like to see. He's got a really nice quick release. I love the way he moves laterally on the field. I also really love how comfortable he is in the pocket. He treats scrambling as a secondary option. If the protection holds, he's going to stay in the pocket and he's going to complete that pass. His deep ball is immaculate, really. It's one of the best like drops in the bucket that we're going to be able to see. He's got a really good ability to create plays on the field. And really, he's just an all-around incredible athlete to watch. Now, I do have some pretty big cons with Jaden as well that kind of put him a little bit further back on my list because of a couple of games specifically. We've talked at length on this podcast about how one bad game is not going to influence a guy's draft stock, but these were issues that I saw in a number of games. He makes baffling decisions, particularly the Alabama and the FSU game. There were times when he would throw into double, triple coverage, and there was an open guy on the field. Now, a lot of the times you'll say maybe with a young guy, that's not that big of a deal, but he's a fifth-year senior and his second school. If he's not making the right decisions now, when will he, right? He runs without a thought for preserving his body, and he's not a big guy. He's 6'4". He's listed at 210. I don't think he's 210. You can look at him on the screen. He looks like he's maybe 200 sopping wet. And listen, those 10 pounds make a difference. He did gain some weight throughout college, and he's obviously made a lot of improvements throughout his college career, which I think that we need to acknowledge that he has improved quite a bit. A lot of people compare his play style to Lamar Jackson, and I can absolutely see how you can make that comparison, but he's less of a dynamic runner, and he's less of a dynamic passer. I think he has really bouncy eyes throughout his progressions. And that's really my main concerns with Jaden Daniels is he has kind of more negatives against him for me than a couple of these other guys on the board. But I know that these guys are also pretty high on him. So, Freddie, would love to hear your thoughts on Jaden Daniels, brother.
Yeah, Jack. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're pointing to. Most of my disagreement is just about what degree he struggles with those things. So he definitely has a very lean lower body. Not only is he low in weight, but a lot of that comes with a lean lower body. And with mobile quarterbacks, you worry about lower body injuries. Not good. Not good at all. That's first of all. And I'm going to leave the positives as you mentioned them because I thought you did a good job with that. Now, for me, I compared him to Bo Nix in a lot of notes. So I'm going to say it like this: he doesn't make many questionable decisions, but he makes more than Bo Nix. And we'll get into Nix a little bit later. I disagree in how many questionable decisions he makes. Not that he doesn't make them, just in how many come into play. Obviously, you want to clean that up. And I would just point this out. Yes, he's a fifth-year starter, but he's still a kid. He's what, 23 years old? I don't know his age off the top of my head. I would guess fifth-year starter around 23 years old. Um, so, yes, you want to clean that up, and it's concerning, but I'm not as concerned about that as you seem to be, Jack. And then lastly, I found him to be comparatively advanced with progressions from where we see a lot of guys coming out of college. A lot of guys don't really make progressions at all. Their offense is both around a one read system. They just kind of sit there, look at a spot, wait for the receiver to enter it, and hit it. I'm not saying that's everybody, but that's what we see from a lot of quarterbacks, and those guys still get drafted high, and they don't get dinged for it because you talk to them, get a feel for how they understand the game, talk to their coaches, understand how their coaches understand these players to understand the game, and then you say, yeah, I think I could coach these progressions into this guy, or I don't think I can. And those GMs will make that decision. So that's what I see when I see Jaden Daniels. So I do have a little bit of a higher opinion of him than you seem to, Jack. But that's all I will say. Mason, over to you for your thoughts on Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels is one of those guys that I've had the pleasure of getting to watch for the last 5 years. It kind of feels full circle getting to talk about him going to the NFL draft. He was when I first graduated high school. He was the quarterback over at ASU, and me and my best friend went to pretty much every home game that year. And it was him, Benjamin, Brandon Ayuk was on that team. Such a fun ASU team that year, and getting to watch him was very incredible. So when he went over to LSU, it was very sad, but it was a really good opportunity for him. And over the years, you've gotten to see him really, really improve. And I think that those improvements are something that teams are really going to look at. The fact that he's consistently improved, and he hasn't had a dip year. He's just gotten better kind of every single year. And, I think to your guys' point, he's elite athleticism, and he's got very, very, very good burst, especially like when he needs to get out of the pocket. I felt like he was kind of decisive at times where he knows, I want to get out of the pocket now, and he gets out. But to Jack's point, he also knows when he wants to stay in the pocket and when to utilize what he has there. So I thought that he was very calculated in a lot of his decisions about, whether or not he wants to scramble or whether he wants to stay in the pocket. And then also when he's finding some of his receivers at well, he made some very calculated decisions. I thought that a lot of your guys' negatives were very, very on point. I really don't have much else to say about, the negatives other than some of the stuff that you guys brought up. And, for me, I think that the positives outweigh the negatives. I think that he's a guy that, you know, again, I mean, I feel like I say this about every single quarterback, but in the right fit, he could be very, very successful. And I think that he's a guy that honestly, like Daniels feels like the guy that out of these guys, he could benefit from sitting back a year and he could wait a year and sit behind a guy for a year and then come in and make a difference. But I think that he's going to make a difference for an NFL team. I think that also, to Freddie's point, the longevity will be a question with the injuries and stuff like that. It's something I think about with Justin Fields every day. Bears fans are questioning that. And, he gets a lot of comparisons to guys like, Cam Newton, who, yes, he's a little bit bigger, but those guys' careers are usually 10, 12 years long. They're not as long as a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning. So that has to be, thought of as well when picking for Jaden Daniels.
Yes, sir. All right. Moving on to our next quarterback. And I believe, I don't even want to say a name. Mason, pull that up. What do we got next? Michael Penix. I was gonna guess Penix. I forgot the order we had set. All right, go ahead, Jack.
All right, guys. I think this one might break my heart a little. So we are about to get into Michael Penix, who, before I say anything, he is probably my favorite player on the board, just sort of a bias standpoint. And now I am going to get into why it's going to break your heart a little bit. So Michael Penix, he's a left-handed passer with a cannon of an arm. He uses his arm like a whip. He's got a really quick release. To me, he's kind of the prototypical of what you would call a gunslinger as a quarterback, right? He's got a very high football IQ. He has great progression reads. I would say probably more than any other quarterback on the board. He puts the ball where only his receiver can get it. You could probably debate between him and Bo Nix, but he puts the ball right where only his receivers can get it. He overcomes adversity like nobody's business. You know, he's led his team to game-winning drives multiple times this year. He's incredibly good at stepping up when it matters. I can't talk enough about how high I am on his IQ. He is consistently accurate across the field. He puts the ball into tight windows. And listen, it does need to be said that he had an absolutely elite receiver core this year. But man, I'm just so high on him as a player, his attitude, what he brings to the team. I think he's just a dog. Now, let's get into some of the negatives. There's two huge glaring issues for Penix, right? So one is that he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie in the NFL, which we know that listen, I know that sounds crazy. Like Freddie said, they're still kids, but those years make a difference when you've got such a short window. The second glaring issue, he has a long, extensive history of injuries. He has 2 torn ACLs on the record in 2018 and 2020, and he has a separated AC joint in 2021, and then he had an other shoulder surgery in 2019. So, and then in the national championship, we saw him play hurt yet again. He had an injured ankle that got stepped on in the game, and then we saw him holding his ribs towards the end of the game. I really like Penix as a prospect, and like the human body is an incredible thing, and I wouldn't be shocked if he had a long and successful NFL career. But we have to understand that these are investments, and asking an NFL team to take a chance on a 24-year-old with extensive injury issues, it's a really tall order. Freddie, what are you thinking, brother?
Yeah, Jack. So I think we may even slightly disagree more on Penix than Jaden Daniels. I thought he was slightly inconsistent with his accuracy, depending on the game. Slightly inconsistent, not super inconsistent, not where May was, but slightly inconsistent. And you know what? I'm going to take my first comment back because we may not disagree on that much. I just highlighted a bunch of notes here, and they're kind of just different and not disagreeing. I also want to mention he is an inconsistent deep ball. Okay, not like the end of the world, or he's not throwing picks on these, but it's a little bit inconsistent in terms of hitting his mark. The couple of other things I wanted to mention. One, he dances a lot in the pocket. He's got happy feet, and that negatively affects his mechanics in a big way. It's not all the time, but it's consistent enough to be a problem that you want to work on. That said, there are 2 positives to me that I wanted to mention that if I'm a GM, I'm going to take these in a high regard. One, he has a floor because he fits into a play action and a heavy motion system, right? He fits into that well. We know that he did that in college, and I'm going to integrate these 2 points together. He played in a new wave NFL system. It's kind of like what the Dolphins are doing is what he did there in Washington. So you know that he fits into that kind of offense. He's already played, progressed, worked through NFL level progressions, right? Maybe even arguably on Tua's level. So, we know this guy has a floor. Yes, there's injuries that take the bottom out of his floor potentially. But there's a lot to like as well, even with slightly inconsistent accuracy and a slightly inconsistent deep ball on which he doesn't throw a pick. It's just not hitting the mark. Mason, over to you for your thoughts on Penix.
Yeah, I think that Freddie kind of echoes a lot of what I feel about Michael Penix, and I think that Jack does bring up a good point that really factored into my ranking and where I kind of have him as a prospect. is the injury history and stuff like that. I think that that is very, very big, and I think the teams are going to look at that and they're going to, especially the fact that he's 24. If they lose a year on him, it's going to be a very important year that they lost. So I think that the injury history is going to be a big thing, but he has the tools to be a very successful quarterback in the NFL. The one thing that I thought that he lacked as far as like consistency was I thought that there were some times that he just I don't know, I just felt like there were some times he didn't get enough air under the ball. Like he has his moments where he can really like, throw a deep ball, but then there were some moments more in the intermediate passing game where it just felt like he just couldn't I don't know, he just couldn't get the ball through the air like I would like. It just wasn't as clean as I would like. So there was a few times I just didn't love some of his throws. I think his throwing motion, granted he's a lefty, but I think his throwing motion is a little bit weird and I think it could lead to some danger later on. But I do like Penix as a prospect. I think that out of the guys that we're talking about today, he has the highest chance to somehow fall down in the draft and could definitely fall into the late first round sort of area. Personally, I don't know why. I feel like Penix is he's gonna end up being a Seattle Seahawk one way or another. Just a little prediction there. I like predicting where these guys go. Somehow I think he'll end up in Seattle.
Yeah, Mason. Well, we got plenty of time to talk about that stuff, and we'll get into that a little more as we approach the draft. But all right, guys, great job breaking down Penix. Let's move on to McCarthy. Who's got McCarthy? That's Mason, I believe.
You got it.
Absolutely. JJ McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. 6'3", 202 pounds. JJ McCarthy is a junior. I know a lot of people have said negative things about JJ McCarthy, and there's also a lot of people, aka Jim Harbaugh, who have said very, very, very good things about JJ McCarthy. Personally, I do have some good things to say about JJ McCarthy. I was very impressed. I thought that he has really good anticipation on some of his second level throws. I think in a lot of the out routes and stuff like that, he has really good anticipation with just knowing where his receiver is supposed to be. And I think you see that multiple times a game with him, at least on 3 to 4 throws, just the great anticipation that he has. I think he also can have very good ball placement on jump balls. I think that he's more consistent with having good ball placement than bad placement on jump balls. And we see him really just give his receivers a chance almost every time. And there was a couple of times in different games too that he was able to put a ball where only his receiver could get it, which I really, really, liked about him. I think that there's a few times as well he's not consistent enough with it. So I think that if he can work on being consistent with it, he's going to be really, really good. But keeping his head up when scrambling, there's a few plays that if he keeps his head up when scrambling, he nails it and makes some of his best plays really of the entire season by doing that. So he has to be consistent with that. And if he's able to do that, then I think that he'll continue to get better, but it's developing the consistency with that. I really think he has incredible arm talent. I think that he has one of the better arms in the class. It's just a matter of putting all of that to fruition. I think that he sometimes his talent is there, but sometimes his reading ability and stuff like that may not be there. He has to be better at kind of taking some of the easy stuff as well. There's a few times he deliberately looks off of his, dump off that could be there, and he has to learn to kind of take some of those easy stuff. While he does sometimes make plays down the field in those scenarios, if he doesn't take those easy stuff in the NFL, it's going to really bite him, and teams are going to know how to attack him. So he's going to have to learn how to do that in the NFL one way or another. Another thing is I think that, it wasn't every game we saw this, but there was a few games that, depending on the defense he's playing, he can get worn down if he's taking a lot of shots towards the end of the game, and you can really feel that in the way he plays and his anticipation. I talked about how good it can be, but there are times that it'll get the better of him, and it's specifically when he gets kind of worn down by a defense, his anticipation starts to lack the more he takes hits throughout a game. He can also get caught on out routes sometimes. That one is a big one that I noticed a few times that just he just doesn't sometimes get the velocity on it like he should. There are times he's really good at it, and then there's times that he just really misses on it, and it's usually when the defender's right there, and that's a lot of his interceptions that we saw over the last couple of years have been on some out routes like that. I also, one of the last things that I thought he really struggles with is he just fails to sometimes see defenders. It's not often, but there are times that he won't see a linebacker or he won't see somebody there. Especially when he rolls out of the pocket, he just misses somebody, and it usually gets the better of him, whether it's an interception or something like that. I've seen it multiple times on the film. Really, with JJ McCarthy, I feel like when he's good, he can absolutely lead a team just fine. But when he struggles, it just doesn't always look pretty. For me, he reminds me a lot of Brock Purdy, but with actually far more arm strength. I think Brock Purdy's big issue is his arm strength. He reminds me a lot of Brock Purdy with just he's calm, he's cool, he's collective, and he's just he feels like a guy that could lead your team to the Super Bowl like Brock Purdy is doing right now. So I really like JJ McCarthy. I think that, more than any of these guys, he has to be put in the right scenario to be successful. It sucks that, the 49ers won't be an option for him because he'd do great there. But I think that he just has to be in the right scenario in order to be successful. But I like JJ McCarthy as a prospect. Jack, what are your thoughts on JJ McCarthy?
Yeah, man. Just so first of all, great points, all of it. I think you did a really great job of breaking down both his pros and his cons. So I just wanted to say that. A couple of just things that I wanted to mention. I think the big thing that we've talked about all year is that JJ McCarthy is a game manager. He knows how to manage the game and do what needs to be done. Now, his cons, I think, are big cons. Like you said, Mason, he does miss linebackers, and he also occasionally will actually drift into pressure itself and just drift into a sack. So his field vision is not elite. And I also think that, like I said, kind of his pocket awareness of where the pressure is coming from, it needs some work as well. I think JJ McCarthy has a lot of good, but I don't necessarily think that he has the elite talent that some of these Caleb Williams has. He doesn't have the elite athleticism that Jaden Daniels has. And I don't think that you could compare his arm to Bo Nix's arm, really. I think Bo Nix has a much better arm, better accuracy. So I like JJ McCarthy. I think he's got a lot of strengths, but I he's just not elite for me. Freddie, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, guys. I mean, I'll keep it simple. Two things. One, if you're drafting JJ McCarthy, you're putting him into a PA boot system. You're not doing sitting straight in the pocket. You're not doing spread. You're probably not doing the new wave system that we saw Penix run in Washington and that we saw the Dolphins run, in recent years, or even specifically last 2 years, excuse me. You're putting him in a PA boot system. That's one. And then two, I need to see him throw a deep ball in the draft process. I notably did not see enough deep balls on film, if any. There probably were a couple that aren't coming to mind right now, but it stood out on film. He did not throw deep balls consistently. And if you're in a PA boot system, your primary attack is a levels concept. You're attacking those linebackers. And if you're never stretching the field, you're gonna see the safeties roll down onto the linebacker level of the field. And if you can't push them deep, if you can't keep them deep, the PE boot system is not gonna work, right? If Kirk Cousins couldn't throw a deep ball, he wouldn't be in the NFL. So that's my biggest question with JJ McCarthy. We know exactly what offense he's going to run. Whatever team drafts him is committing to that offense. And two, for them to do that, though, he needs to show that he can throw a deep ball in this pre-draft process. That's all I got.
I like both of your guys' analysis. I think you guys make very, very good points about JJ McCarthy. It'll be interesting to see where he gets selected in the 2024 NFL draft. Finally, we are on to our final prospect we're talking about. It's Bo Nix.
Yes, sir. I'm very excited to do it. And for those that caught it, I mentioned that for Jaden Daniels, some of my comparisons or some of my notes were just comparisons to Bo Nix, and there's a reason for that. Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are the top two quarterbacks on my board. We're not really getting into rankings here, but I'm a fan of guys who have a floor, and we'll leave it at that. So I compared these two guys to each other because to me, these are the two guys that are competing for that primary spot. Bo Nix, let's get into his positives, then we'll get into his negatives, and then we'll figure out why on earth these guys disagree with me. So one, Bo Nix has great mechanics and fundamentals. If you look at the physical aspects of his game, he does everything right. I mean, it's really close to Trevor Lawrence, if not on par with Trevor Lawrence. and as he was as a prospect. He also has very, very good accuracy. Very, very good. I don't know how to quantify it. We could figure like a 9.6 maybe or something like that, but very, very good. Approaching elite. He stays calm under pressure. Okay, that's a big deal. He has decent athleticism, not fantastic, but he can move around. He can do some things. You do have to think about him using his legs. He can put the ball anywhere on the field, right? He has accuracy. He has the arm for it. Um, Speaking of, he has solid arm strength, or even very solid arm strength. So, right, he can literally hit anywhere on the field. And then this is the kicker for me. He doesn't, excuse me, I got overexcited and said the wrong word. He got better as the season went on. That is a huge, huge note. I don't care how old you are. I don't care this, that, the other. If you have a lot of positives, as Bo Nix does, and you got better as the season went on, sign me up real quick. That said, one negative that I'm going to mention, and then I'll pass on to you guys for your negatives. He doesn't have a lot of experience working through progressions. A lot of his throws were schemed up. He's looking at a spot on the field, hitting receivers as they enter it. So that's what I saw on film. Jack, over to you for your thoughts on Bo Nix.
Yeah, Freddie. So that's one of my major glaring issues with Bo Nix is I kind of worded it differently, but I guess it's kind of the same thing, is that he's so comfortable with the short ball and dumping the ball that he sometimes misses the play developing. And he doesn't necessarily let the play develop and throw the deeper ball that would be open. But positives for Bo Nix: very solid mechanics, great shoulder control and torque, like you mentioned. He's got very good velocity. He's got a very strong arm. He's really, really good at identifying mismatches in his scheme. I particularly noticed that in the Washington game. That was really, really interesting to watch. He's great at fitting it between the corner and the safety. Like you mentioned, Freddie, he is incredibly accurate. He has a 78% on target rating, which is the highest in the class. Another thing that I noted that you also said, he has made incredible strides since last year. And I think that, like you mentioned, is really important. He's improving his game. I wrote here, he has a super high ceiling, but he does have a floor. And I think one of my big issues with him is I think his footwork needs a lot of work. And I'm actually really surprised you didn't bring it up. I think he has his glaring issue is that he gets happy feet. Now, in college, it didn't come back to bite him that much because a lot of the time his receivers were so open that they were able to make the play anyways. But if you go back and you watch the tape a couple of times, because his footwork, he gets happy feet, he misses his feet, he throws off of his back foot, he doesn't step forward to throw the ball, he misses a little bit. So he needs to clean up that footwork. But like I said, cleans up the footwork and, maybe let the play develop a little bit. And I'm really high on Bo Nix. I think he's got a really, really high ceiling, but he does have stuff he needs to clean up, particularly that footwork.
That's interesting, Jack. I will have to go back and give it a second look. That is not something that I saw first round on film, and I have to apologize if I am wrong. I will own it. I did not have a ton of time to go back and do a second run through of film. I did get 6 games, but I didn't get a second run through. Mason, over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix he's one of those guys that I've done the least research on out of these 6, but I do feel a lot of the research that I do have with Bo Nix. I can tell you this, that something that Freddie kind of touched on a little bit, but there was not too often he was asked to do difficult things at Oregon. A lot of the concepts they ran and a lot of the stuff they ran were simple things, stuff that it makes me wonder how well he's going to translate to the NFL, running an NFL style offense that could be far more complicated than anything he had to deal with at Oregon. So that is what I would say is my biggest gripe. But as a athlete and really with the arm talent, I think he's very good. I think he can be solid for a team, but it just depends on really, I think, the scheme. I don't think he fits into a lot of NFL schemes. I think he's kind of that really perfect college quarterback, but I think he's going to have some struggles kind of fitting in the NFL. If he does fit in, I think he could be really solid, but there's definitely going to be some growing pains with Bo Nix for sure.
I think we should note also, I don't think this is fair, but I do think that people will say Bo Nix hasn't won the big game. So there's a couple opportunities he had this year and he didn't get the job done. I don't think it's fair to hold that against him, but I think if you don't think that that's going to be brought up in a war room, then you're crazy. I think it's definitely in consideration.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jack. I accept that point. And by the way, I appreciate both of your thoughts. We're kind of all on the same page. Jack pointed out something I have to go back and double check. But I will say this: if I'm running a war room and someone says, "Well, he never won the big game in college," I'm firing that person. I swear. I swear. I don't care. I don't care. Look at the film. Look at what he's able to do. Look at how his body works. Look at how his brain works. I don't care. Yes, there's a clutch factor. I'm not discounting that. But it's not like he fell apart in those games that Oregon didn't win. So they're fired. If someone says that to me, they're fired. And I'm not saying you were saying that. I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, and it may come up in war rooms. They probably run it differently than I would. And look, I'm not an NFL GM, but I just wanted to say that.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. And yeah, Freddie, go back and just watch his footwork a little bit. I think you'll see a pretty glaring issue there. And I'm not saying that he can't clean it up and he won't have a ton of success in the NFL. But I think when you notice it, you'll be like, yeah, that's a problem. Particularly the fact that he doesn't step into his throws.
Yeah, man. That would be a huge problem. And that would like clearly move him down my draft board.
That's why he's 100%. Anyway, but any final thoughts before we wrap up this thing? I did want to make one more quick note on JJ McCarthy. I just think that we do need to bring up the fact that he has been elevated a lot by an incredible offensive line. And like Freddie said, we haven't really seen him throw the deep ball. So I just think that he's maybe getting a little bit elevated by his team right now. And we haven't necessarily seen everything that we need to see out of him. I just wanted to make that point really quickly. Anything else that you gentlemen would like to say about any of the prospects that we went over tonight?
Yeah, man, I would just tag on to that a little bit. And that's why I devalue the big game, because McCarthy won the big game. But that doesn't really translate to him. Again, these are wins and losses are team stats, not quarterback stats. I know Brady won 7 Super Bowls. I lost count. He won a lot of Super Bowls. And he's fantastic. He's the most accomplished quarterback of all time. Will probably remain that way. Mahomes might give him a run for his money, as might some others that will come along. But it's not just a Brady stat. These are team stats, and that's why the whole MVP conversation. That's a whole conversation for another time. As for just the last notes on a quarterback, I'm pretty good. I feel like we kind of touched on everything I wanted to mention. Mason, what about you?
I really don't have any more points. I think that we were able to cover everything that I wanted to cover about some of these guys. And I think that, for me, I kind of took the lead on Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy. They're two guys that they're vastly different, but I like them both. And I think that Jack's point about what was around JJ McCarthy is important. And I think it's important that we think about that for all of these teams, especially that we have to think about what's around them. I think that, like I said earlier, I've mentioned it a lot, but the situation these quarterbacks are in is vastly important, and it's important every single draft. It's very important, and we see it in college because the situation they're in very much helps their draft projection. So I feel that, we have some really good quarterbacks this year, and I feel like every year we come in and we've got plenty of good quarterbacks, and only one or two end up sticking. So it'll be interesting to look back and see who was right and who was wrong about these quarterbacks.
That's a great point, Mason. It's a great point. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this first rendition of our 2024 NFL Draft position breakdowns. This was our quarterback episode. Coming next up will be our tackle breakdown. So make sure that you stay tuned to catch up how we break down all of the best tackles that are entering the draft. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we are available on all major podcasting platforms. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and you can definitely catch us on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next week.